to the RunnerX podcast, where we talk about all things running. As many runners know, it's 90% mental. So join Coach Valerie and Coach Caroline as we go through the mental side of running.
Welcome back to the RunnerX podcast. Valerie and I are here, and we're going to talk about something we've mentioned before, but we had somebody posted a question, or actually sent in a question about the idea of a 2-hour marathon. And this is the mental side of running. So we talked in that podcast, and we'll link back to it in the show notes, about why you don't want to run more than 2 hours, whatever your pace is. And how it,
or don't need to,
right? That it wrecks yourself. So let's talk about that mentality. Why? Talk to me about, how do I get past that if I'm scared? Valerie, I'm going to run a 6-hour marathon. I'm a 10-minute miler. How do I run 2 hours and still get over that mindset hump of my friends that are running 18 miles, my plan, everybody says this, and then how am I going to run 26.2?
Right. And well, so first of all, and also realize that we are really, and Carol and I say this a lot, the majority of runners that come to us, first of all, they're injured, right? So already the running is not pain-free yet. So that's our first step with everybody, is running pain-free. And to be fair, in the last 40 years of recreational running, and we're going to use the U.S. because that's the biggest data we have, 85% of runners are injured.
Yeah.
And that number has not budged. With all of the shoes, with all of the surfaces, with whatever you want, the technology has not reduced the injuries. And I'm not just talking about regular runners. I'm talking about recreational to elite. Our elite runners are just as broken as our recreational runners. And if you go back and see what happened to make people think that mileage was the answer? Like, what records have been broken simply due to mileage, right? If you go back and look at history, really in the United States, history goes with Nike in our country. So Bill Bowerman, who was the head of Nike, he actually in the beginning, New Zealand was winning the marathon. This was like in the 60s or 70s. He actually went to New Zealand to meet with Arthur Lydiard, who was the coach back then of these guys in New Zealand, that won the marathon that year. Today, who do you know from New Zealand winning a marathon?
Yeah, nobody.
Okay. And that doesn't put nothing against New Zealand, by the way. So what happened is, here he goes over there, and the guy says, well, these two guys that won, they were running about 100 miles a week. He comes back to the States. He's like, we all need to run 100 miles a week. Well, that's the answer.
Yeah.
So, by the way, people are still trying to run this 100 miles a week.
Yeah.
And how many people are actually successful with it? Almost none.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot name right now these amazing marathoners that are all running 100 miles a week and not breaking.
Yeah.
And it's true. And then you go and break that down a little bit when you watch, or if you read, like, let's go with the current champ, Kipchoge. I hope I'm saying that right. Eliud Kipchoge. He just ran a 2:04. He's already broken the 2-hour marathon. 2:04 was now his race that he did just 2 days ago. Not for his A race, guys. He did this because he wanted to be in marathon shape. They put this marathon together for him. So 2:04, marathon, not in marathon shape.
Yeah.
But to understand that his level of skill is intense, is elite. When he trains, does he go out for 2-hour runs trying to run a marathon in 2 hours? Absolutely not.
Right.
And to be fair, most of his training runs, if you go through his training schedule, he does a morning run and then he does an evening run. He might run for 2 hours total that day.
Right.
In between those runs, he's getting a massage, he's eating like he's supposed to, his team is taking care of him. And what you guys have to realize is these runners, they're running a lot at a higher fall angle, higher speed. So when they go out for a 2-hour run, they may hit 20 miles in that 2 hours.
Right.
But they are really sticking to that time. And the reason is physiology shows us through studies that past that 2-hour mark, the body actually starts to break down. So physiologically, there's no more gains past that 2 hours. So what we have found with our runners that are not going to break 2 hours in the marathon, They want to break 2 hours in the half marathon.
Right.
Most runners I know are very happy to be, I'm not putting down pace. They're really happy to break a 2 hour half marathon.
Right.
And we are happy for them to do that. So if they're breaking a 2 hour half marathon, their full marathon, you're right, is somewhere between 4 to 5 hours.
Right.
So when you're asking someone that, number one, probably has family, full-time job, responsibilities in life, everything about that, to run these 2 hour runs, what we're asking from you guys is to give your body enough stimulus or enough running to build a foundation. So during the week, you're still running, right? You've got your runs that we also prescribe to you. And on the weekend, just imagine if every weekend you keep saying to your body, you're going to have to go out and run 3 hours, 4 hours. How do you recover from that?
Yeah.
If past the 2 hours I'm breaking down, but I'm like, my training plan says I've got to run 18, right?
Right.
What are you actually doing?
Yeah.
You're suffering. Your mind is suffering, your body is suffering, your heart is suffering, your bones are suffering, your joints, your ligaments, everything is suffering, and then it's got to be recovered. Well, are you willing to spend the next 2 to 3 weeks recovering from that 3 hour run? You see what I mean? So letting go of the mindset of the volume, it's we talk about this a lot, but to recognize this, guys, that if you really take yourself through our training, and again, don't get stuck on thinking I'm just going to have you run 2 hours one time and that's it.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about repeating to being able to run 10 miles, 12 miles, a half marathon, up to 2 hours, and you're testing that and repeating that. The reality is a marathon, guys, is an extension of a 10K.
Yeah.
Physiologically. It's not double a half marathon. So when you start to look at your movement and your training and the effects it's having on your physiology, you're definitely like, most people say to me, whew, thank you. I don't want to go run 4 hours this weekend. And again, we're not just testing your time, we're testing what happened during your run.
Yeah.
Were you able to maintain the form?
And I'm thinking there's two things that I'm hearing here that I've thought about a lot. Is one, you're testing, you're allowing me to live my life, right, and not get wrecked and not get injured, so I can leave everything on the race day, right? If you're going to wreck yourself on race day. Don't wreck yourself before race day, right?
Right.
Because then you have 3 weeks,
right.
3 weeks to run.
But you're preparing for the performance.
But then when I'm going out and let's say I do a 2 hour run on Saturday, and then I want to do a 1 hour run on Tuesday, because we're now going to be able to, I'm not wrecked, I'm going to be able to actually recover.
Right.
And do a 1 hour on Tuesday, and then I can do some speed work on Wednesday, and then I can do another 1 hour on Thursday, and then do a 2 hour on Friday, right? So,
right.
And at the end of the week, maybe I've done 50 miles, but it's the time. So now you can start preparing your mental side, because I can tell you guys, you've run 12, 13 marathons. I've run 4. And I can tell you that it's not about the putting one foot in front of the other. It is, guys, it is 100% mental. And I've run it with other people. I've run a half and then gone back and ran the last 6 with 3 or 4 other people on multiple runs. It's the mental side of, oh my God, I just ran my 2 hours and I've got 2 hours left to run. Or there's a woman ahead of me that, I love watching the women that either run, walk, or, it always gets my heart when I see a veteran with like an amputee, and he's killing it, and he ain't stopping. He just keeps going, right? And you think to yourself, and I'm going to stop and walk through the water. You know what I mean? So you get yourself into this mental workup where if as your monster month, as they like to call it, if your monster month was just repeating every so often that 2 hours, and you really worked on your mentality while you're running, that could be huge. I mean, that's really
also, and to be fair, if you know how to run, just remember that. Most people break down in a marathon not because of their cardiovascular.
Right.
Go to mile 18 to 20 and watch the runners. I promise you, they're not bent over.
Yeah.
They're trying to stretch their calf, or they're trying to get the pain out of their hip. I've seen people try to walk backwards. I've seen people tape ice on their calf. I've seen things in marathons because they want to finish. However, if I don't know how to run, then really I'm starting out at zero, if you will. So when I start to break down and I have nothing but, my hope to get to the finish line.
Your will and your perseverance. Right.
And by the way, in my world, I feel like once you've signed up for that marathon, you've already made that choice.
Yeah.
You will finish.
Yeah.
I mean, barring anything crazy, but most of us will finish. We'll gut it out because we're those people anyway. Like we already signed up. We're kind of nutty. So just think of the difference in what we're also teaching, and people forget about this. In the moment. Be present in the moment. I'm not thinking, or you shouldn't be thinking, I'm only running 2 hours, or I've got 2 hours to run. You're not running.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, where's my fall point?
Yeah.
Am I pulling my foot?
Right.
So then during the run, if something's not right, you have a way to correct. Find a line to run on. Pull your right foot for a little bit. You're starting to feel something? I'm telling you, it's like once you start running by running, the time isn't the issue.
Right.
Because you're running and then you feel like, okay, I'm off. Let me correct. Like you said, we're building those new grooves.
Yeah. So
you're not going to go back to that old mindset or that old pattern that was causing you to need to stop moving. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Totally.
So then if you, let's say though, guys, if you're in your training and say Valerie's like, okay, today's a 2 hour day, and you come back and you're like, man, after about an hour, my right leg started to cramp. And then we talk about, well, what did you do? And then we can also go deeper. How was your sleep? How was your recovery?
Yeah, what were you eating? Yeah.
Right? All of these things factor in, guys. But first, we want to make sure, can you run an hour pain-free? Can you run 2 hours pain-free? When you finish your run, if you literally felt like I could not take one more step after that 2 hour run, we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, when you line up for the marathon, your mindset's already in a different place. Right. And by the way, just kind of a funny little thing. A friend of mine who's a marathoner, runs marathon, took 3 kids to Disney, her 3 kids to Disney World. And after about 4 hours, her feet were hurting, her hips were hurting, and they were not done. Her kids were like, we just got started. And so she was laughing like, I should have had you make me a training plan for how to walk up and down Disney World for 8 hours.
That is so true. Just on that same token there, guys, I ran 4 marathons, and 2 marathons in, I had already run 2 marathons. I was not the weight I am. I was 150 pounds. I was doing Krav Maga and running, average 20 to 25 miles a day, right? I was pretty driven. A week, I'm sorry, not a day. You're right. It was like 5 miles a day, but pretty much every day doing strength training. I was in shape. And I went to the Grand Canyon, and we just walked the South Rim. Just one day. We went one side of the South Rim and then back. My calves were on fire. Right. My husband was laughing at me. He goes, I thought you were a marathoner. So it is. It's a difference of what you're doing, how you're doing it. And is it also mindset that's also?
Of course. But I'm laughing that we would never think I need to train to go to Disney.
Or to go to the Grand Canyon and walk the rim.
Well, right. But of course your body actually would like some training. But were you able to do it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Was she able to make it through Disney? You bet. You see what I mean? But we were laughing at, the point is when you run the marathon, guys, what's not holding you back, I promise you, honestly, it's not the car. It's not that when you're running and people say, if I'd have just maybe run a few more miles. Absolutely not. And just so you know, I had to buy into, because I went through all of it. I went through the Galloway method and the Hal Higdon in the beginning, all of those, the marathon legends that kind of helped the recreational runner turn to marathon.
Right.
And it was fascinating back then. Jeff Galloway was the first person to say it's okay to walk.
Right.
Right. They used to say if you walk, you're not running the marathon.
Yeah.
So we would try to run our water stops because we didn't want to be those people that were walking.
Right.
I'm not kidding you.
That was
the information.
And that was just I'm talking about. I started marathoning in 2010, so I was told that.
Right. And
if I walked through the water stops,
my first marathon was 2000. I trained for 1999, and it was January, so we had just gone from 99 to 2000. So that's 21 years ago, and literally we were like, we can't stop, or we won't have run the marathon.
Right.
Okay. Just so you know. And the funny part is, in my very first marathon, I hadn't done any training. I had run 10K, and a friend of mine's like, you got to try a marathon. All right, I'll try a marathon. And so your mind will get you there. Your body will get you there. Let's get you there having fun, and whether it's racing. And by the way, to be fair, now I don't only train, we train everybody. I had a guy go through my marathon training plan. At the same year, by the way, 2 people go through my same exact marathon training plan at their own ability. One guy ran 3:01. She was very excited. I was nervous because I know he wanted to break 3, but it was his first time to try to break 3. So 3:01 he was happy with, and yes, he has broken the 3. And the other person ran a 4:30 and was just as happy.
Yeah.
On the same exact plan. 3:01, 4:30. Did they run the same pace? No.
No.
Did they run the same training times? Yes. In his 2 hours, did he run a lot more miles? Yeah, you bet. Does he need to run more than 2 hours? No. Neither does my person that wants to run a 4:30.
Yeah.
Why should I expect them to go out and tear themselves down when, by the way, not only did she run a 4:30, she has since come back, has run a 4:15, and is now working her way to sub 4.
Wow.
Because first, mentally, she had to believe she could.
Yeah.
First, she had to believe she could run a marathon. You see,
Yeah.
the guy running the 3:01, he didn't have any doubt I could run. He's simply going for time.
Yeah.
See the difference? Both training the same. And that's what we want to get across to you guys, is that the fun of running is really in the running.
Yeah.
And then just like Caroline said, you run 2 hours Saturday or Sunday, then you want to get up and go run again, you can.
Yeah. So let's end it on that idea that you put it, first you have to believe, because that's the other thing, guys. If you are looking to run a marathon or a half marathon, you've never run it before, you first have to believe that you can.
Right.
Okay. So when I was trying to train for my first one, and again, I was training with Team in Training, awesome group, but they did by time. So I had to go out for 3 hours, and I had gone out my hour and a half and it was turning back. And I just remembered, so I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'd gone out my hour and a half, and I'd been doing run walking, and I was at 7 miles after an hour and a half. Or not even 7 miles. It wound up being that I calculated it out at that turnaround that I was going to run a 6.5 hour marathon if I did this. And I can tell you, I sobbed the entire hour and a half back to my car, and I was miserable. And that was months before I actually had to run it. I wound up switching to the half marathon because I was traveling at the time. There's just a bunch of emotional stuff. But my point is that you have to be mentally prepared to put your body through a challenge. You're not going to kill yourself. I know my friend that at the time when I did that, she was not a marathoner. She has since become a marathoner, but she kept texting me and going, the first marathoner died.
Right.
That's, people will tell you that. The first marathoner died. Yes, I get that. But the point is, you have to mentally prepare yourself for the fact that you have now challenged yourself, and your first goal, I'm going to say this and I'm going to get flack for it, but your first goal in your first marathon should just be to finish, period. Finish. Please, finish. Second marathon, then you can say, now I want to finish for a time, or I want to finish it without being injured or whatever. But
well, we want you to not be injured.
Yeah, we want you to not be injured. But the idea is to finish, because that's what you signed up to finish.
Right, and also, don't take away from the race day. A lot of people want to go out and run the race before the race, and then, then the race is kind of,
Then it becomes anticlimactic. We call it marathoners malaise.
Yeah.
People get depressed after the marathon because they expected, this was like when I turned 40. I'd make this joke. When I turned 40, I thought I was going to wake up and suddenly look like this supermodel, right? Who I thought was Rue Lalenska. She was actually Kelly, some other 80s model, right? So I thought I'd have red hair, right? I've got green eyes and blonde hair. It's actually kind of mousy blonde. But I thought I was going to suddenly wake up at 40 and be a red-headed, big-boobed supermodel. I can guarantee you I did not wake up that way. And it was very disappointing. So people think they're going to go through this marathon and it's going to be some weird, euphoric feeling.
Yeah.
And when it's not, you feel really let down. So the challenge or the fun is in the training, is getting you there. And just to close it out, I think you put it best. When you're running the 2 hours, if you can't run after the 2 hours, or like you said, your calf starts hurting you, start looking at what you ate. What are you doing? Your marathon should then be totally about, when do I get my water? When do I take my goo? You start looking at just the technical other sides of running that distance, right?
Well, and also, and go back to running. Like, we're teaching you how to run. So when something's not feeling right, you have a way to correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's number one for me. It's like most people, again, we talk about this all the time. They get through it. I've just got to get to the next mile marker. I've just got to get to this. I've just got to get to that. How are you getting there?
Yeah.
The fun for us is that we're actually right now, we're falling, we're pulling our foot. We've got a job to do. And when you start running like that, first of all, most of us are pretty task oriented. It starts to become, wow, this is feeling really good. How do I keep enjoying this good feeling? Well, I keep falling and I keep pulling. And that's the simplicity of that, I promise you, is what makes you want to continue the running or finish the race.
It really is that simple, guys. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us on the RunRx podcast. If you'd like to know more, join us at www.runrx.fit. And if you have additional questions that you'd like answered on the podcast, email us at support@runrx.fit.